bit of this is going to be an enhanced and better version of last week's program because I talked about open book management last week, and I said I was looking for my guest to show up last week, but guess what? She wasn't supposed to show up last week because I had scheduled her for today the whole time. And so this is a senior moment on my part, but that's all on me. I'd like for everyone to meet Miss Cindy Stein. She is the auditor of Greene County, Missouri, and she's been the auditor since 1994. What's notable is that in Greene County, the auditor position is an elected position. So she is a, if you will, a politician as well as being a CPA, and we won't hold either one of those against her today. What is the reason why I wanted to share this story with you is that Greene County has adopted the concepts around open book management, and I've been talking a lot about open book management. I want you all to hear from a person and how this can apply in the municipal environment, and we also want to discuss, and I brought somebody on here that is doing it, how it also could apply to a nonprofit, obviously to a for-profit. It has tremendous financial benefits. I want you all to stop. This is worth hearing the story. And so first off, Cindy Stein, welcome to the Grow Your Business Today program.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to join you, and I'm loving hearing the numbers of voting participation in the area. And polls are open late in the evening. They're open on Saturday. They're open on Sunday. I too close my office on election day, and my employees go and work the polls. So I applaud you and commend the work that you all are doing for elections in your state.
Awesome. So before we jump into the specifics of open book management, frame for us Greene County, Missouri. Where is it? What's the size of it? Just share some sort of basic things about Greene County.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Greene County is in southwest Missouri. We have a population of about 275,000. Our major city is Springfield, Missouri, and we're very, very, very close to Branson, Missouri. And people seem to know where Branson is because that's an entertainment capital of the area. We have a variety of industries here. We have a lot of outdoor activities. It's a good mid-size area with a lot of opportunities for folks.
And so you are an elected official inside Greene County. What are the other elected officials within the county? Obviously, I assume there's county commissioners.
Yes, we have.
And what else?
We have 13 independently elected officials outside of our judges, and that involves the county commission, the sheriff, the collector, the county clerk, the treasurer, recorder, assessor, and collector. So we have a wide variety of people. Because we're independently elected, we fall under different statutes. So it's important that although we may be independently elected and we may fall under different statutes, that we come together for the success of what open book management has afforded us. And we're very fortunate that we've been able to do that.
So now tell me a little bit about what is it that gave rise to Greene County deciding that they wanted to look into open book management as an idea?
Yeah, it probably isn't something that comes to mind right off the top for a governmental agency or perhaps a nonprofit, but we found ourselves in a quite a challenge after the economic downturn of 08 and 09. We were not recovering, just like some businesses weren't recovering. And we happened to be in the hometown of Jack Stack, the father of open book management and Great Game of Business. And so we asked if he would coach us to get us started in open book management. It wasn't something that we naturally came to, but we felt like there was no place to go but up. We couldn't go any further down. And we saw almost immediate results.
So when you said you didn't recover, can you share with us, some of the financial information so people can kind of understand what you mean by did not recover?
Sure, I can. We just to give you kind of an example of how you can live day to day, check to check. Our payroll is what was at that time $1 million a pay period, and we had $2 million in the bank.
Mm.
So that told us we could do 2 pay periods.
Mm.
And so we were living what I call paycheck to paycheck.
As a municipal organization, it's one thing for families to live paycheck to paycheck, but the idea that the county government would be living paycheck to paycheck, I think, is something that's pretty shocking for most folks.
I think it would be, and I think that's where we came to the realization, although we had tried for about a year after the downturn to recover, we weren't successful, and we were like, well, what do we do next? We're relatively knowledgeable people, we're trying to do the right thing, but obviously it's not working. And so try something very different, and open book management was that answer for us.
And so tell me, walk me through the progression of that decision.
Really, it involved myself and the county administrator kind of walking the plank, if you will, stepping out there and deciding that why not try this. And while at the beginning, not everyone was on board, I'll freely admit, certainly once we were able to start practicing open book management and teaching financial literacy and working with folks in that arena, we were starting to see some success. And, success certainly brings people along. And so, you're either going to join with success or you're going to be left behind. So it was pretty easy then at that point to bring people along to the journey.
So the basic concepts of open book management, it sounds very similar to what, open book, meaning that the whole idea of opening the books, the idea of sharing numbers, and as a county government, to share the numbers, which quite frankly, as citizens, we have the right to see all the numbers.
Sure.
And at some level, you publish the numbers. So what's the difference between, every year, every county government produces its financial statements, and pretty much nobody other than the elected officials and the staff, the high level staff, looks at it. So to use open book management, it requires a higher level of engagement. And so I want you to share that notion of the engagement that takes place.
Yes, thank you for kind of transitioning to that, because it truly is engagement. And that's the key word that you describe this action that we've taken. In reality, it becomes that education process of financial literacy. And it would probably be a little surprising to folks that when you talk about government or private business or anyone, you expect the CEO and the president to thoroughly understand the financials. And honestly, that's probably not always true. Now, in some cases, it is true, but there's a lot of cases that they get the financials at the end of the year, they nod their head, but they don't truly understand the financials. So we started teaching our employees, our coworkers, everybody on our campus, financial literacy at the very basic level. Okay. For us, what does property tax mean? Where does it come from? What is sales tax? What are the types of revenue sources for which we operate from? And then from there, it's like, what are the types of expenses that we have? We may not understand what other departments or offices have as their operational expense. So we need to learn that. We need to understand that, so that as we start to understand the financials, we as employees can act on that. So we can find where there's efficiencies and savings that will affect the bottom line, because now we see how that affects the bottom line. So I think the financial literacy is a key piece. From that, we have been able to open our books in such a way that you can go to our website, greenecountymo.gov, Greene with an E on the end of it, and you can look at our checkbook. You can see what checks we wrote yesterday. You can see what revenues come in, what we've spent. So not only are we educating our employee base and our campus, but we're trying to educate our community as well.
So you said something about understanding the different expenses. So within this situation, you've got the sheriff's department,
Mm-hmm.
you've got basic county functions. Are you suggesting that you want the people who are responsible for garbage disposal, waste disposal, to actually understand how the sheriff's department spends money and vice versa? I mean, is that literally what you're saying?
I am saying that before we get to that step, first
Okay.
you understand the line items of your department. So if you're in maintenance, you need to understand all the maintenance lines and how those lines are affected. Once you know how to manage your team, you can help another team as well. An interesting example that we've seen recently is it cost us in the jail about $1.03 a meal to produce food. And that's, we are able to do it very, very, very efficient. Um, because of COVID and the exposure to the kitchen and et cetera, we had to close our kitchen for a time period and contract to have the meals delivered. So we went from paying $1.03 a meal to $16.50 a day. And we have
Wow.
800, and we fed 800 people 3 meals a day. So that really became a aha moment for people that's like, okay, I understand the financial impact of that. I understand the why behind it. I understand the short term of why we have to cover that expense, hoping to get past this and then get back to our regular $1.03 a day, $1.03 a meal.
Right. And so the entire employee, so I think what you're saying to me is, first off, the folks in the jail understood that it cost $1.03 and it went from $1.03 to this higher number. But the entire workforce, and quite frankly, the entire citizenry, can begin to understand, you know what, we've got this incremental expense that we have to cover because of the nature of COVID and the risk of COVID. And
Right.
so those are dollars we've got to spend. We're not going to have a fight over why you spent. We don't have to have that fight. And we
Right.
also know that our budget is only so large. So if we know we've got to spend this money over here, it's got to come from someplace. So we either got to figure out a way to raise revenue, or I've got to figure out a way to cut expenses someplace else. And instead of just a few people at the top knowing this and trying to convince the workforce, the staff, to do something different because it's required, they can see it themselves. They don't need to be managed into this because financial literacy has allowed them to grasp the implications that you've got to have a budget that fits all together.
Yes, and I think that's an important point, is that instead of having the 13 silos, the sheriff's in one and I'm in another or whatever, we've broken down those silos because now everyone understands the challenge that the sheriff has temporarily in the jail. And so we're all on the team to help that. Okay. I've got savings in my budget, so I can contribute to that cause, so we're all on that team, versus I've got to protect my budget. No, we're all in the same arena.
So I have to imagine that the notion, while you and the county administrative might have thought this was a great idea on the front end, as you said, not everybody was on board. And I'm sure there's someone and I'm sure there's people listening to this is, oh, that'll never work here, right? So how did you get started? How did it get started, and how were you able to perpetuate it?
Well, we asked the team at the Great Game of Government to come to our campus and provide a one-day workshop for us. We invited all of the elected officials, department head, and leaders of our county government. And we also invited the leaders and folks from other governments, like the city of Springfield, the major school district, city utilities, all other municipality type things, because we felt like this is not Greene County alone. This is our community, and we need our community to participate in that.
Exactly.
Following that one-day workshop, we started the very next week having what we call county huddles, where we meet once a week and talk about the county's financials, educate about the county's financials and what they mean. We did that for probably 2 or 3 months, maybe just a couple months, and we had to move the location because there was so much participation. So we had to move it to a big hearing room where we could accommodate the people who were interested in learning about this open book management concept. We've gotten everybody from, like the road crew that goes out and paves roads to everyone has participated, and they get very competitive because they want to be successful. So they get competitive in their projections and projecting their expenses, and everybody participates in that.
You just said something that I think it's a perfect segue. Uh, okay, so you introduce the financials to the workforce. You explain to them how the numbers work, how the income comes in, how the money gets spent, how you need to have a cash reserve on the side. But then you actually involve them in managing the organization. And you talked about line items, having employees responsible for certain line items. Well, let me take a step back. You said in the process of educating the workforce, the first thing you do is help them to understand the expenses in their department, and then you want them to understand the expenses in other departments.
Mm-hmm.
Then after that, you ask them, okay, we want you all to have an impact or be able to manage certain line items in the budget. So explain that idea, please.
Well, I mean, it seems a little simplistic in its core, but if I'm in building maintenance and I'm responsible for janitorial, okay, so I need to understand what it takes to run the janitorial operation, what the supplies cost, what the margins are, where we are with chemicals. So the janitorial staff started to educate themselves on that, and they realized, you know what, when we mix up our chemicals for the day, we just pour it in a bucket and we go. And they decided, you know what, if we read the labels and we measure according to the labels, well, how much product we need, we could save several $1,000s. And sure enough, it was the workforce that came up understanding what their line item was of the chemicals that were being purchased, and then realizing that, hey, we need to actually measure this instead of just pouring from the bucket. And now we can contribute because, the janitorial staff may say, well, I don't know how I could contribute to the bottom line. I don't know how I can help open book management. And yet they can. So it's always the workforce that comes up with the ideas of this chemical measuring, or I'm going to find a more efficient way to do this task. And by doing that, I'm going to create efficiencies, which saves money at the end. So understanding that very basic line item in your department, whatever you can impact, is kind of critical to the process.
We're speaking with Cindy Stein. She's the auditor of Greene County, Missouri. In Greene County, Missouri, the auditor is an elected position, and she's sharing with us how Greene County transitioned to using open book management as a way of, through financial literacy, of improving the financial performance of Greene County. I probably should have let you jump to the end and then backtrack. So I'm going to do that. We're in the middle right now. But as a result of implementing open book management, you said early on that you were spending $1 million a week, a pay period. You spent $1 million a pay period on salary, and you only had $2 million in the bank. As a result of implementing open book management, we're going to go and share more about the details. Where do you all stand today? And if you can use that same metric, that would be great. But if not, one that would that the audience would understand.
Sure, absolutely. We've moved from that dangerously precarious $2 million in cash or reserve to now over $25 million in cash reserve. in just a few short years. And certainly we are a very, how do I say, we're a very lean organization. And so we're going to operate as if we're lean, no matter if we're healthy or not. We're going to operate lean. That's just the nature of our organization. So we're fortunate that we've been able to recapture our reserves in a healthy level, so that we can weather the storm. I might share with your audience something that kind of gave me an aha moment, if we're kind of jumping to the end a bit,
Yes.
is, this pandemic has hit everyone in a multitude of ways, whether it's hardship, whether it's financial, whatever the implications are. And we knew as a county that we were going to be heavily impacted by finances, because sales tax, which is our major revenue source, was not going to be flowing as freely as it would have been. And so we met as an organization very, very, very early on with our financial leaders, the 3 commissioners and our 3 members of the financial team, treasurer, auditor, and budget officer. And going into the meeting, I kind of thought, this is really going to be gloom and doom. This is really going to be, pretty devastating as we start looking at what these numbers mean. But to my surprise, we all came to the meeting and everybody had something to give. Everybody had an idea. We all knew, because of our financial literacy training and open book management, we knew what role we played. So we actually came to the meeting with great input, great ideas, and left in such a positive fashion that I couldn't have foreseen that. But I guess I mentioned that to your audience, is that we just now know, because we're trained in financial literacy, that we don't have to now stop and educate. Everybody mobilizes, everybody acts, because they know here's what we need to do in order to attack this issue that we're facing.
Is there one or two examples of things that my assumption is, so let me ask you, I'm drawing an assumption, that the presumption was is that, man, this could result in some significant budget cuts, somebody could lose their job, there's all these really desperate things that you presumed.
Mm-hmm.
And so against that backdrop of that kind of bad news, when you say you were pretty happy leaving, what in effect did happen?
Yeah, so in reality, because we had been in a practice of really analyzing data and understanding it, we went and took our top 50 sales tax producers in the community, and we analyzed their sales tax trends, and then we applied a quotient to it. So we would say, okay, this grocery store, it's actually going to have an increase in sales. This home improvement store is actually going to have an increase in sales because people are home, they're improving their homes. Restaurants, okay, they're going to have a decline. So we went and we analyzed all these pockets of industry to apply a quotient and a ratio. And surprisingly, once we did that exercise, the pluses and the minuses, evened out a little bit. It
Wow.
wasn't so much that all the minuses were taken over. It was just walking through, making that exercise, everybody having input of analyzing that data. And we would never been in a position to do that before.
What's interesting, I think it's probably fair to say that most I want to go back to something you said at the beginning about the notion that there's a presumption that the president or the CEO of an organization understands the numbers. I want to confirm the fact that is absolutely positively not the case. Most, particularly in the small businesses, but even in mid-sized businesses, they rely on their financial people. Those CEOs and presidents know how to generate money. They know how to make money. They know how to inspire people, but they're not necessarily literate on how the numbers work. Interestingly enough, when you consider elected officials, it is not a requirement. We're not looking for our elected officials to be financially literate. But think about how much more powerful it would be if not only all the elected officials were financially literate, but the entire staff, the administrative staff. You used the example of janitorial. You know, I can't even begin to tell you the number of times I've grabbed a bucket and I just pour I just pour, you know, I'll pour some whatever the soap is, I'll squeeze it in or I'll pour it in and I'll put water on top of it and I just go. You know, I never think to say there's an appropriate ratio of that liquid that if I measure it out, I could save money.
Hmm.
And to get the workforce to begin to focus on that. Folks who listen to my radio show know I have a with my son have a restaurant, and he is the lead entrepreneur. I'm just playing a small role, but we are bringing this to the staff, right? It makes a difference when people understand those elements. Let me. I believe, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that um, the financial changes that you've made has impacted the county's credit rating.
Oh, yes. Thank you for bringing that up, actually.
Yeah,
Um, we had a slight downturn in credit rating after the economic situation that was occurring in 08 and '09. And it was our goal to not only recover our reserve balances, but it was our goal to recover our credit rating as well. Now, we were never downgraded to a large degree, so it never impacted us greatly, but it was enough that we felt proud enough that we wanted to turn that around. The next time we were reviewed, once we had recovered our reserves, not only did the rating agency give us an increase in rating, they also cited in their report our work by using open book management was a significant factor in our recovery and our improved rating, which that's amazing that
it
they would
is.
cite that in the report.
So, you know, one of the things about this education, let me ask how, uh, one of the things that plays out if you play open book management the way the great game suggested is that to really engage the workforce, you ask them to play what is called a mini game. And so if you could explain mini games and perhaps use an example or two inside government in terms of how it has been applied.
Sure. Many games for private industries or private businesses typically are going to be very specific. You know, we want to reduce inventory. We want to increase the turnover ratio for accounts receivable. We want to reduce our cost of goods sold. So it's very specific to those types of things. Within government, those mini games take a little bit different view because we're not selling widgets and we don't have those opportunities to impact our revenue. What we typically are looking for is finding a process or finding something that needs to be improved. We're always looking at our reserve balance, and that's always key on the radar. But behind that, what things can we improve either in an individual office or countywide? Are there countywide improvements that could be made? So we will create a game that's going to solve that issue. So for instance, I'll just take my office as an example. So my office, we started our mini games, and our first mini game centered around communication. We felt like if we could communicate well within our office, then we could start communicating well with the other offices. And if we communicate well, we're going to have a better work product and we're going to have better processes because we're now communicating well. That seems very basic, and people go, well, yeah, yeah. But you have to start sometimes at the very basics, and it may not be something that you see immediate effects to a bottom line, because it's creating those efficiencies and building those communication tools that you need within the organization. We took that a step further with the next mini game, and we went out and we started shadowing other departments to see what they did, how they did it, maybe make improvements to them. And then we asked them to come and shadow us, shadow us and see what we do, and are you seeing things that could be improved, or and educate on what's being done on both sides. So that those are a couple examples on just mini games within government. Of course it can be more dollar vision. For instance, if we're talking about, let's say, the prosecutor's office, and they want to have a certain conviction rate, and by having a certain conviction rate, they're able to produce things in the bottom line. So there's a lot of different things depending on what department you're talking about, of how they could create mini games around their specific department.
Hmm. Very good. So, when you're doing this, what I know is just that government, they're always looking for ways to grow to grow revenue, to do things, and everyone is always resistant to increase taxes. Um, I guess I have two questions, because I didn't frame that very well. I'm curious as to how the opening the books and doing financial literacy, what has that done in terms of employee morale? And then what has that done in terms of how the citizens' view of government may have shifted?
Yes, thank you for that question. It's done a number of different things. I'll first start with our employees. Our employee turnover has dramatically dropped. Our retention is much higher. And so we've seen some definite bottom line effects of that with our employees.
Well, help me
Um,
go into why would open book management improve retention? What's the connect? What's the direct connection there?
okay, I'm going to have to tell you a story to get to
Okay,
that. Um,
please.
so our very first aha moment playing the great game was everybody had to project their expenses, every department. And in typical government fashion, we would project our expenses based on budget. If our budget is X dollars, that's what we expect to spend. True government fashion, nothing out of the ordinary there. Although in all reality, you don't spend exactly your budget. That's just not reality. So that first year, everybody projected their budget, and going into the next budget year, the commission, who's the decision makers, it looked like we were going to spend our entire budget, and our employees had not gotten salary increases, raises of any kind for 6 years. So going into the 7th year, no raises again, because we all projected we were going to spend our budget. Lo and behold, after the books were closed and we'd done the financial statements, we didn't spend all our budget. And when we revealed that in the weekly huddle to our team members, and they realized they controlled their own fate of getting raises or not, there was a gasp in the room, because that was
Mm.
their aha moment. If we had projected a little more accurately, we would have been in control of our own raises.
It's a little bit about the lazy approach is to take the budget number, but reality and budgets are never the same. Sometimes you spend a little bit more. We'll use the example you gave about the jail and the
Mm-hmm.
food, cost of food,
Yep.
and other people are going to spend a little bit less. You're doing road construction, and for some reason, some easement tied you down, or it was tied to some Department of Transportation project, and they're not ready yet. There are all sorts of reasons why you're off. And so if you could accurately say what you're actually going to do versus what the budget tells you you're going to do, that extra work provides leeway for any organization to
Yes.
pivot and to make different and better decisions.
And we continue to stress that better projections create better budgets and better decision making. And we needed that aha moment. The finance team knew all along we wouldn't be spending what they projected, but we needed to go through that exercise. It was painful, but we needed to go through it so that we had that teaching moment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So I say that to get back to your question about the salaries, that the employees needed to go through that and come to the realization and now recognize why it's important for open book management, why it's important to be part of this team and create sustainability with this team.
Awesome. And then the citizens, what has going to open book management, how has it impacted their perception of government, or in any other way you'd want to frame that?
Yeah. So you were correct in your assessment in that we really don't control our revenue sources. I mean, they're set by statute and et cetera. And like you mentioned, it's very difficult to go to the voting public and ask for an increase in taxes. That's just not a very popular thing. And we had not been successful with that, of trying to have a tax initiative passed. But through open book management, we worked in educating our public about our finances, and that was critical to us actually passing a law enforcement sales tax a few years ago in order to help those law enforcement costs that we were incurring that were escalating. Our budget really was staying pretty even, except for the law enforcement component. It continued to rise. So without education and open book management, I don't know that our voters would have been receptive to a positive vote for increased taxes.
Has open book helped the county think through its investments in projects, or in its ability to attract industry? I'm just curious as to, are there other real benefits that are out there that you've seen?
Yeah, what I'm seeing is, we were the first local government to embrace this that we're aware of. But what I'm seeing is it's growing into other governmental agencies, a ton of nonprofits. I can't tell you the number of nonprofits that have embraced it and have improved their operations. It's exciting to see. So with that, that gives us that better community to then attract those businesses that are coming to our community, because we are all working in a collaborative fashion. So we don't have silos between the different agencies. It's all in a collaborative fashion. And open book management helps facilitate that.
Awesome. I want to connect this back to our listeners. 2 years ago, I think it's 2 years ago, when the state of North Carolina reallocated how they view the tiering of counties. So in our state, there's 100 counties, and the tier 1 counties are the 40 poorest counties. When they reallocated the tiering, Cumberland County, North Carolina, where we are, moved from being a tier 2 county, meaning kind of mid-wealth county, to the 20th poorest county in the state. And that gave rise to a series of meetings that Mayor Mitch Colvin started, where we brought not just government, but some of the nonprofits together in conversations around how we could do things more collaboratively. At that point in time, open book was not, while I knew open book, I had not actually applied it to a business myself. But I would suggest to our community that we have a huge opportunity to embrace these ideas. They, as you said, apply to nonprofits. It applies to government. It has had tremendous benefits on the business side, on the for-profit side, that are hugely beneficial. Let me ask you, we've got a couple of minutes left here, and I'm talking to Ms. Cindy Stein. She's the auditor at Greene County, Missouri, and their community has been using open book management for several years. Are there some tidbits or some insights or some things that you said, boy, I wish you'd asked me about this or that you'd like to share here as we get here toward the end of the program?
Well, let me kind of start by telling your listeners that it doesn't happen overnight. It's not easy, but it's certainly worthwhile. And there's times when you just have to take a bite. Start with one part of the organization, or, it may not be something that you can take all in one fell swoop. Like in county government, we're all independently elected. So there wasn't one president or CEO at the top kind of dictating. We had to come together as a team. So know that there's not a one size fits all. There's a lot of ways to try to start this process. There's no right or wrong way. Knowing that, you'll have hurdles that you'll have to overcome. But everybody's had that. There's not an organization out there that this can't work. You can say, well, it won't work here because, well, because everybody, we've seen it. So it's if it can work in government, oh my goodness, it can work anywhere. It can work in your government, or it can work in your nonprofit. It can work in your higher ed. It can work. I am open to have your listeners, email with questions or follow up. I'm totally open to helping others, because I know eventually we're doing this here in Greene County, Missouri. We've taken it to the state of Missouri, and they're starting to implement in certain areas. I'm hoping to go to Washington. That's my goal. I mean, honestly, I believe that's possible.
I do too, and just a little. I actually have begun doing some training through the Department of the Treasury with the U.S. government, and I'm introducing agile and open book principles to them. So you've got to figure out how you could sneak in the side door.
Yeah.
You sneak in the side door, and then suddenly something begins to germinate and it becomes bigger or more effective. We today exist, and it's probably my final question for you. We today exist in a state where I think our faith in government just about can't be any lower than it is right now. We just don't believe. If you're a politician, frequently the presumption is either I think you're lying, or the person next to me, I might believe you, but the person next to me thinks it's lying, or vice versa. Through financial literacy, through understanding how government works, how receipts come in, how expenditures impact government. One of the more powerful things is that you can take that home with you, because there's no literacy in the household. There's no financial literacy in the household. I just think that, and when I asked you about your ability to pass that tax increase, what I was really kind of asking was faith in government. So I got about a minute left here. If you want to offer up a broader perspective on this faith in government and the impact.
Sure. I know our time is limited, so I'll keep it brief. Certainly faith in government is maybe at an all-time low. The thing we have to remember is that local government is closest to the people. So if you can build up your local government to have trust in your local government by sharing this information with your citizenry and becoming a partner with them, then you've now built that trust back with your local government. That's key. I may not be able to affect state or federal government, but I know I can affect local government, and I know I can help our community. So I would stress that that's where you start, because yes, Perfect. It's at a low, but we can turn this around at the local level.
Perfect. Cindy Stein, Auditor, Greene County, Missouri. Thank you so much for having spent time with us today. We truly appreciate it. Hope you have a wonderful weekend, and all the success to you moving forward.
Thank you.
To our audience, it's vote. You can vote tomorrow. You can vote Sunday. Let's get out and vote. I will see you all next week. You listen to WID Wake Up.